Williams, quarterback to the California.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to the 2025 post-NFL draft edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. As always, guys, a quick reminder before we get into things to please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Lots of great content here on the Bar Room. If you're not familiar, it's not just our show, but many others. All kinds of good content. We had great coverage during the draft. We will again, I'm sure, in the future, and there's always great coverage throughout the season and the offseason. So please give us that follow. Like I said, you can follow us all on X or Twitter also. I'm at _Jeff Willis. You can find Tim at Tim Willis 24, and you can find our executive producer, Aldo Gandia, at Barroom Network. And we are here every Friday night live right here, like I said, on the Barroom Network, as Aldo has on the graphic at the bottom of the screen there. So getting rolling here, guys. It was the draft. Before I introduce Tim here, like I said, I want to mention something about this past draft. I thought it was a little interesting that there was, we talked at length about how there was so much, I don't know what the really word I want to use is, but such sporadic opinions from everybody about where these guys could go, where different people in the draft could go outside of the top, 6 or 7 players. There were a lot of different opinions about guys up to about 70 or so. So what my point of all this is I don't think really anybody anticipated the way the Bears draft was going to go that way. I mean, there were a few picks that guys might have had here and there, some prognosticators and other people might have said it, might have gotten a pick here and there, right? But for the most part, it was very much outside of the spectrum of what most of us in the media thought was going to happen, as fans in the media, I should say. So, Tim, swinging it over to you, what were your initial thoughts from the draft class, the initial 8 guys they brought in, before we kind of dig into like the specifics of it and what kind of happened throughout it?
So my initial reaction is it's a good draft. I don't want to take anything away from what they did accomplish. I thought they stuck to what I've been saying for months now, in that they went with best available player on the board. And it wasn't best available need. It was best available player. And that was more evident than anything when they took Luther Burden with their second round pick at number 39. Clearly the best player on the board for them. It was actually reported that it was I believe it was Ian Rappaport that reported that it was their best wide receiver on their board. So clearly the value was there for that pick. And we'll get into more specifics with the actual draft picks here shortly. But I will preface this by saying, more so than in the prior drafts for Ryan Poles, I truly felt like this draft got away from him several times. And what I mean by that is I believe there were several opportunities in this draft for him to take, for instance, a running back or a specific player. Let's just say Travion Henderson at number 39, he went number 38. There was a slew of running backs that went in that 4th round right before the Bears picked. There was another one, a defensive end, I believe. I can't remember who it was or which round. What was that?
Braden Swinson, edge from LSU.
Yeah, Braden Swinson. He had went like 2 or 3 picks prior to the Bears pick. I felt like, in my honest assessment, I'll preface it with this. I really like what Ryan Poles did here, and I have been a fan of most of his drafts. I think no GM is going to be perfect. They're all going to make picks that don't pan out. That's part of the process. Those things happen. You can't get inside the head of an NFL or a college prospect. You just don't know all the time. So it will happen on occasion. But I will say, for the most part, he has done a very good job, especially in that 2nd round. He has really hit on his 2nd round picks that he has made. My issue with this is I truly felt like there were moments where he got a little bit too greedy trying to trade back and it cost him a few times. Now, there were other times where he traded back that I believe the player that he wanted got taken, or the players that he liked in that area got taken. And so he felt, well, the value is not here if we stay and pick here. Let's try to trade back. But I feel like a few times there, he traded back too far and he missed out on a lot of talent that he probably could have gotten had he stayed where he was, or had he maybe not traded back as far. Clearly, he has a good relationship with Buffalo because they've made multiple pick swaps and trades and things of that sort, dating back to his, the original when he first tried to trade for when he first tried to sign Ryan Bates 3 years ago or 2 years ago. There have been several transactions between the two teams. So I don't know if he feels like that's such a great relationship that, that maybe that was his first call. Like, hey, I want to get back here. Maybe nobody was calling him and he said, do you want to swap picks here? Do you want to move up? And so they made it work. But I don't necessarily believe that it was necessarily always the right decision to move back as far as he did. I will never hate accruing extra capital, and I love that he swapped back with Buffalo for a third time. If I'm not mistaken, it was the third time, and he was able to get an additional 4th round pick for next year. I thought that was a great move. I liked that. Again, though, I felt like they traded a little too far back, and they missed out on some talent that was there that I believe would have been better than moving down and trying to accrue the extra picks. So it's a little give and take here. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. We'll know here in the next few years. But again, I don't want to take anything away from the draft because I thought he did a very good job of addressing some important things such as depth, which I felt like we really needed, especially on the offensive line. I think Trapillo was a great pick for that. I don't necessarily know that he's going to walk in and be a starter, but I believe they're going to give him the opportunity to challenge for that spot. And it's going to be the best 5 that will start. And I believe that he's going to have a good opportunity to do that. But again, it's a rookie coming in and there's a lot of experience on that left side, not necessarily elite play, but there's a lot of experience. And we're going to find out sooner than later how that's going to shape up. But I do really like what they did with the depth. I like the Loveland pick. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who are loyal, faithful to our show, I've been saying it for weeks now, months now. When everybody was talking about Tyler Warren being the pick, I said he is not a fit like Loveland would be. Loveland is a much, much, much better complement to Cole Kmet, and he's also better for what the offense wants to do. He's closer to, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name. Detroit tight end. Laporta, thank you. He resembles that much more than Warren did. And I felt like Loveland would be a much better fit here, and he would he'd be more likely to be picked than Warren would be, in my opinion. And come to find out, the Bears felt the same way. Not saying that I'm some genius, but it was evident on tape that, you wanted a move tight end. You didn't want another inline guy. You wanted more of that F or whatever you call it, tight end. There's so many different ways people call it, but it's a move tight end. That's what I'm getting at. They wanted a guy that can be out in space. He can play in the slot. He can play X. I mean, this is the guy you want. So I loved that pick. I thought 10 was a little bit rich, but I don't think anybody was wanting to move up. So you had to take a pick there. And that was the guy that was on their board. You could tell that was 100% a Ben Johnson pick. That's the guy he wanted. You could hear it in his voice when he made the phone call. He was super excited for Colston Loveland to be his first pick as a head coach. Like I said, Jeff, I like the draft. I like a lot of the moves that they made. The one head scratcher to me, though, outside of the trade backs, there were a few that I thought, again, not necessarily good value considering how far back they moved down and lost out on talent. But the Ruben Hyppolite one was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. And that was because a lot of insiders and a lot of people that are in the know believed that he was going to possibly be a priority UDFA, not even necessarily drafted. And there was nobody that really, I don't think anybody had him higher than a 6th round grade. So that was a little bit of a head scratcher to take him in the 4th round. But again, they've been preaching. They wanted more speed at that linebacker position. But Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong here, or give me your opinion on this. I don't think he's ready to contend for that Sam linebacker spot yet. I think he's got a lot of work to do to get there. I think he's going to be more of a special teams guy at this point, which again is why I thought it was a little bit of a reach at 4. What do you think?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here with what all you just said. I mean,
I was spewing a lot there.
But okay, so just go in regards to Hyppolite, that pick in and of itself. Yes, when it first came in, it was surprising. I had never even heard of the guy until I saw that pick, to be frank with you. I said that it first came in and I said, who? That was the initial thought that came to my mind. But then I started to dig into a little bit more. And obviously a lot of the prognosticators were saying the same types of things like, this is not a guy that has been talked about a lot. But I mentioned I was on the day 3 show he had here on the Bar Room around during the seventh round when they were talking about we were kind of discussing like that pick of Ruben Hyppolite, and I mentioned that I was watching ESPN coverage of it, and the other guys had been watching NFL Network.
I was watching NFL Network too.
What was interesting to me was the guys on ESPN like Kuiper and Riddick had both mentioned this guy was very, very underrated by and had not been talked about much by the national pundits and the local media market as well. Not enough people were talking about this guy. So that kind of tells you something there is they liked him enough to say that about a player that was looked at as a reach by a lot of other people. So my kind of take on it was it's a 4th round pick. Was it a bit of a reach? I mean, it's hard to say right now. I mean, in the moment, maybe judged based on what other people were thinking about it. That being said, again, we can't really say what these guys are going to be for another 3 years or so. So I'm not going to jump down the Bears' throats for taking this guy in the 4th round because, again, it's a day 3 pick. It's not like Adam Shaheen getting taken in the 2nd round out of Ashland, back when Phil Emery was here, or not Phil Emery, Ryan Pace at the beginning of his tenure. So it's just one of those things where I kind of understand it because they talked about it before the draft, many times. They were looking for speed at linebacker, and they were not lying. This guy is faster than shit. Swifty mentions it right here. 4.4 linebackers don't grow on trees. Damn right.
I don't know what you just said. I heard there was something in my background, but did you say that he would have been the fastest 40 time at the combine had he been invited? Did you mention that?
No, but that's an excellent point.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
So you add that on to the fact, like I said, Swifty mentioned, they don't grow on trees going that fast, 4.4. And Tim, good point. He didn't get invited to the combine. So there wasn't a lot of eyes on this kid to begin with by people who maybe aren't super tuned in to what's going on and don't watch a ton of film. So looking, from the outside looking in, yeah, there's a lot of people who would say it looks like it could be a reach, and maybe it was. But there's a couple things here. Obviously, they weren't lying when they said they were looking for speed. That was important to them. This guy, when you do watch his film and you do watch his tape, he's an impressive player. He's not very big. He's like 5'11", I think. He's a little undersized. I think he's like 220 or something. He's not very big. I mean, he might even be 220. I'm not 100% sure exactly how big he is. But Swifty says here, too, he might have been a UDFA if he didn't run that 40. And that's probably true, too, because there was a lot of people who mentioned that just based on his film, they don't know if he warranted being a 4th round guy, but that speed really got him there. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, like I said before, they obviously meant it when they said they were looking for this. So this is a guy who you see it on his film, though. He does move sideline to sideline. He's got good instincts. He's a really good tackler. I think he's going to immediately have a huge role on special teams. So I think Hightower was probably a big part of this too. He probably watched a lot of this guy's film and said, I would love to have him on teams, probably going to be a gunner. So I could see that right away for him. I think he's a depth guy on defense, though, Tim. Yeah, that's the thing. You mentioned him as a Sam linebacker. That's the weird thing to me, though, is I don't know if that's really his best spot because the Sam linebacker is a guy – the guy is a good tackler and he's good against the run. But a Sam linebacker to me is the guy who's really only in on base downs, obviously. So this guy's really good in coverage. You're going to want him on the field on third down sometimes, maybe not right away, but eventually I think that's the goal, is to develop this guy into a guy who can play on third downs and play in coverage. Ryan Poles mentioned it in the press conference afterwards. This is the guy we valued for his coverage and for his speed. So,
and speaking of, Jeff, I want to throw this little nugget in here if I can. There was a linebacker that they signed as a UDFA. I don't know if you caught that, Jeff, but that's a guy I've been looking at that could possibly be that replacement Sam. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah. His name's Power Eccles from North Carolina. That could be our Sam linebacker. And again, when did we get Jack Sanborn as a UDFA? You can find a linebacker to fill that role there, I believe. So we'll see how this plays out, but that's a guy I'm looking at that could potentially make the roster. And if we're being totally honest, I kind of believe that Noah Sewell might be on the short list here of cut candidates.
Well, I don't know about that because he was a draft pick. Real quick, though, before I say anything else, look at this graphic here, guys. I mean, can we just give a hand to Aldo? Because this man is excellent. He put this thing together today in a matter of it was maybe a half an hour at the most. I mean, he put this thing together. It's so professional looking. It's got everything, all the players that were drafted by the Bears, all the UDFAs, or at least the reported UDFAs that have been out there, because the Bears haven't said it on their own yet. So, but I mean, like I said, can we just give this guy a round of applause for this? I mean, it's just excellent work here, and it just looks so nice. So, thank you, Aldo, for doing that for us. And Tim, look, I see what you're saying about Eccles possibly being a Sam linebacker. The one thing I would kind of mention is that this roster and the depth that's on it right now and the way that it's been put together over the last few years, it's going to get harder and harder and harder for people to make the roster. I think every UDFA that's been brought in is going to have a very difficult time making this roster.
Absolutely.
I will say that
to be fair, it's going to be tough for some of these draft picks to make the roster too. Yeah,
I think the ones this year, personally, looking at these draft picks that are on the screen here that we saw, and we'll go over all these guys in a little bit too. Mm-hmm. But the ones that were drafted this year, I'd be surprised if any of them didn't make the roster this year.
I agree with you,
because number one, the depth in the positions that they play, and number two, just because I think the Bears got really good value with these guys they got in the late rounds, more so than they have in the past. Give you a good example of this. So let's compare it. So Poles' first draft, he traded down a whole bunch of times and he ended up with 10 or 11 picks or something. A lot of those guys were in 5, 6, and 7. So I believe in round 6 is where he got Doug Kramer. So you compare a guy like Doug Kramer when he was coming out to this Luke Newman kid. In my personal opinion, we're talking night and day difference coming out. I think he is going to be, not only is this kid going to make the roster, he's going to push to be a serious depth piece and, maybe one of the first guys in at guard or center. I think he could be a backup center in the future. Maybe he's the first guy that gets that crack at it if he impresses well enough. So, I want to talk about him in a little bit too, but I just think that in this particular draft, I think they did a really good job of finding guys who are going to be depth pieces for them, and I think they're all going to be good enough to make the team. I want to get into Monangai a little bit later too, because I think he's an excellent pick in the 7th round. So, just to back up a little bit, guys, and I want to remind you, as always, please, if you guys have any comments or questions that you want us to get to, please feel free to leave them in the chat, because we're probably going to be bouncing all over the place with this draft coverage and draft talk. So let us know whatever you want us to dig into. We'd love to address it for you. And also, we want to know your thoughts too. So anything you thought might have happened, or what your thoughts are about what Poles might have done, or what he messed up on, or what he missed on, or Ben Johnson's thoughts, or guys that he might have had influence bringing in, let us know. But going back to the beginning, you talked a little bit about Colston Loveland, Tim. I don't want to spend too much time on him, because I think that, really it's been dug into a lot over the past week. This guy, in my opinion, he's obviously a tight end, and you and I talked about this on the show many times before the draft, and you said it too earlier in this show. He's just a better fit for what the Bears have right now with Cole Kmet than Tyler Warren was. I mentioned it before. They're very similar players. Greg has mentioned it several times. They're very similar players, inline tight ends. Colston Loveland is a receiving tight end, and a very, very, very damn good one. So his route running for a tight end is absolutely superior. So when you see this, he's a guy that in my opinion, Ben Johnson's looking at him, and yeah, Tim, I think the Laporta comp, everybody's been talking about that, and it's for good reason. I think that's a good comp for him. I think he's got a bigger ceiling than Laporta.
I was just gonna say he has much better traits even than Laporta did. He's taller.
I think he's going to be a weapon on the offense. When they first drafted him, I'm sure they envisioned using him in a multitude of ways, including the slot. I think he's going to be used in a multitude of ways, including the slot. I think they'll use him out of the backfield some. I think they'll do a lot of different things with this kid. They're going to get, I think he's, like I said, he's just going to be a weapon. So moving on a little bit, because I do want to talk about Burden now. Burden was one that was really interesting to me. So when the pick first happened, when they stayed at 39, and you mentioned Travion Henderson going 38 to the Patriots. First of all, when that happened, I mentioned this on I think I said this on the show on Saturday when I was on there with the guys. When Travion Henderson got taken by the Patriots, I was literally screaming obscenities.
You were throwing a massive fit. You were texting me throwing a fit.
My gang get taken.
It wasn't quite like that, but
it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
Pissed. It's just because, there's been a lot of talk about this too. Greg's another guy who's surmised this, and I believe 100% to be the truth. Just because of the way it went down. I think the Bears were targeting Henderson there. Greg thinks the Bears were targeting Henderson there. Many other analysts and prognosticators think the Bears were targeting him there. I think, and Swifty, you make a good point. I think the Colts did want Loveland just to kind of backtrack a little bit, and they kind of settled for Warren, but I think a lot of Colts fans liked Warren because I have a lot of Colts fan friends, and they wanted Warren. So I think that they were all kind of happy with what they got. But in any case, when that happened, when Henderson got picked there, I think the Bears, and Greg made a great point about this, and other people have talked about this too. The Bears took their sweet ass time making their pick. They took every bit of that 7 minutes they had. And I think it's because they were sitting there thinking to themselves, man, Henderson, and I agree with you, Swifty. I think if it was Henderson there at 39, they probably would have gone Henderson and then Burden at 41. I don't think they would have traded down there if Burden was sitting there at 41 because that's great value. And that's why they took him at 39. But again, though, I'll let you go in a second here, Tim. But I was just going to say that, talking about they're sitting there at 39, their guy just got taken. Now we got to pivot. We see this guy sitting there who's got great value. We don't necessarily need a receiver, but here's the thing. A lot of people have not necessarily talked about this. At least I haven't heard. We've heard a lot about how great the value is with Luther Burden there because a lot of people saw him as a first-round pick, first-round talent. But what people are not talking about so much is what Ben Johnson mentioned several weeks ago in one of his press conferences and the importance of the slot receiver in his offense and how, for whatever reason, in his offense, the slot receiver just has a tendency to find the football. It has a tendency... They have a tendency to get the ball to the slot receiver for whatever reason. And like I said before, I think they're going to do a lot of movement around with guys like Colston Loveland. I think DJ Moore is going to play a lot in the slot. I think Rome is going to get some time in the slot. I think all these guys are versatile. And I think that's a good thing. But I think this Luther Burden pick, part of it was because of that. They probably looked at it like, hey, man, this guy is a slot receiver. He's got enormous upside. He could be one of the best slot receivers in the game. If we bring him in here, let him grow in this receiver room with Antoine Randall, who, by the way, was, hyped for this guy when they drafted him. Seeing him in the draft room, talking to him, you could tell he loved the fact they were getting this guy. So the importance of the slot receiver in this offense, the value of him being there, it might not have been ideal because of the fact he's a receiver, but look at what could he be in the next 3 or 4 years for this offense? What could he be for this team? It's a great problem to have. So, and again, versatility. J2K mentions he can play outside. I think this guy can play anywhere. So you look at like I said, the versatility of all these guys, of all these weapons they have on offense. They're going to do some different things here. A lot of people talked about they were upset we didn't get a running back earlier. I'm kind of in that department too because I really wanted Travion Henderson there, and they missed out on him. But that being said, I really like Monangai a lot too, and I'll get to him in a little bit. But again, there's so many different guys here with so much versatility. I think Johnson's going to get really creative here with the way he does things. I think he's going to line guys up in backfield like DJ Moore and Colston Loveland. I think things like that are going to happen. So I think that's an extension of the running game there. And we saw in Detroit a lot of jet sweeps and stuff with Jamison Williams. I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff with the Bears now too, with Luther Burden and with DJ Moore and some of these other weapons who are fast and have that kind of speed. So I'll move it on to you now, Tim, because I know I kind of was digging into it a little bit myself like you did earlier. I kind of went on a tangent a bit there. But, I mean, what is your thought about that before we kind of move on to the next guy that was drafted?
Well, I will start real quick by also addressing what Swifty was talking about earlier, that the Bears probably would have taken Burden at 41 had if they were able to take Henderson at 39. The only thing that I would say to that is, if the Patriots don't take Henderson at 39, do they take Burden at 39 instead? So he may not have been there anyway. It's hard to tell who they would have taken at 39. I mean, obviously, this is all hypothetical. We don't know. But I would say I would agree with you, Swifty, that I think they wouldn't have traded out of that pick had they been able to take Henderson at 39. I think they would have taken Burden at 41 and they would have just stayed put. But I mentioned it earlier that, the Burden pick, I mean, he just fell. You got to take him. Like, this guy was a first-round player. It's a no-brainer to me. Now, I mean, I agree to a point. It's a little bit of a luxury pick just because you guys, the Bears don't necessarily need another receiver of that caliber there. I thought they did a good job in free agency finding guys who could stretch the field a little bit, offered some kick return and punt return ability. Zacchaeus is a kind of like a touchdown magnet in the red zone for being a smaller guy. He caught a lot of red zone targets for touchdowns. But, I mean, we're comparing – now, granted, he hasn't played a single down in the NFL. But you put this guy up against those guys, it's not going to be close, in my opinion. This is a far superior player. And what is the point of the draft? It's to draft great football players. You want to improve your team, regardless of position. This is where you start getting into trouble when you start drafting for needs and not best available player. And I've said this probably 100 times in the last month. You got to take the best available player on the board because that's what the best teams do. Then you never get in a situation where you feel like you have to take a guy because your roster needs this player. You get into trouble every time you do that. You start reaching and taking players where they shouldn't be drafted instead of taking good players at that spot. So again, the talent is certainly there. And it's ironic that he is literally like a DJ comp. Like they're so similar. Physical players, great route runners, speed is about the same. They're both quick twitch, fast players, not burner speed necessarily, but they're quick off the line. These guys get open quick and fast. They're both tough at the catch point. They'll make a tough catch. It's crazy to see that. And, some people questioned and said maybe this is DJ Moore's replacement. Guys, he's here for 6 more years. DJ ain't going anywhere. So you got to get that one out of your heads. But
when is the out on his contract? Because he re-signed for, I think he added like 4 years.
It was 4 more years.
Have him out after like 3 though.
It might have been, but I mean, regardless, he's here for at least 3 years. He still has 1 more year on this deal, on his original deal this season. So I don't know, but regardless, I mean, we're talking. This is a great problem to have, in my opinion. I mean, there's going to be times where we're probably going to see Adunze, DJ, Loveland, and Burden on the field at the same time, and maybe even Cole Kmet. They may find a way to put all those guys in the field and not have a running back out there. We don't know, but regardless, I mean, it's gonna be fun to watch. Like, try defending that. Seriously, try defending that because it's going to be tough.
Love's running empty, Tim. I guarantee you they're going to run empty.
I'm certain of it, especially with Ben Johnson. Now, granted, he loves to run play action, which we've been screaming for years. I'm so excited for that.
Plenty.
I'm so excited to see that happening. But yeah, Cliff, I agree. It's a D coordinator nightmare. Trying to defend all of those guys. And Loveland is such a matchup nightmare for anybody that's going to try to cover him, with the exception of a corner. Good luck.
Hey, look, we're all Bears fans, right? We all know the lore of the 85 Bears. What was the one thing that the 85 Bears defense struggled to defend? Getting spread out. And that's the kind of thing where you're going to have real problems with teams that are really good at it. Obviously, you can't strictly do that in the NFL because teams nowadays will adjust to that. There's too much speed in the game now. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's a problem. You got a good point, Tim. If you got enough weapons there, it's like, how do you defend them all? You're going to put your third or fourth best cover guy on Colston Loveland, your fifth or sixth best on Cole Kmet. What are we doing here? You can't cover all these guys. So,
well, and this is not Luke Getsy. This is not Shane Waldron. Ben Johnson is going to find a way to get these guys the ball. He's going to find ways to scheme these guys open, get them the ball, make it tough for teams to decipher who's getting the ball here, who's in cover, or who's running a decoy, whose route is the number one read here. Like, it's going to be tough for anybody trying to defend that. And I want to point this out really quickly because we've talked about Cole Kmet extensively over the time we've been here because we're Notre Dame fans. We watched Cole Kmet play at Notre Dame, loved him there. I remember when he got drafted, how excited I was that he went to the Bears. He's a local Chicagoland kid. Look, Cole Kmet is a top 10 tight end in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. He is a top 10 tight end in the NFL. Yes, he's an inline blocker, but he plays like a move tight end too. The guy can flat out play. And to have two tight ends now that can stretch the field a little bit, Cole's not going to a burner by any stretch, but he gets open down the field all the time, especially down the middle of the field. Try defending that without any receiver play. Try defending those two tight ends. It is a freaking nightmare for anybody that's going up against this team. And that's why I'm all for the Loveland pick because that is such a great tandem there. This, honestly, call me crazy, this might be the best tight end duo in the NFL. And it's probably not close.
Okay, pump the brakes because Loveland hasn't played it down in the league yet. So.
I'm saying potentially. I'm not saying right now. And again, I agree. He's got to be on the field, but potentially.
It absolutely could be. It's got the potential to be sure. I mean, when Cole Kmet is on, if he plays as well as he did a couple years ago, he's a top 10 tight end in the league. You pair that with the potential of Colston Loveland, this guy's potential's through the roof. So they absolutely could be a top tandem in the league, but they're not there yet. We got to wait and see. But I agree with you there. They could be. You're muted, by the way.
I do want to tell New Harper, I'm glad you agree with me, but I will say pump the brakes a little bit on Loveland being the best because Brock Bowers, I'm telling you, that guy's a potential Hall of Famer. He is unbelievably good. And he is more of a receiver than a tight end, though. That guy is unbelievable.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're about halfway through here, and I know we're going to have some questions at the end, so I want to kind of move along a little bit here. But, yeah, I agree. And we're going to talk about these guys a lot more in the future, these offensive weapons that have been brought in. And I do kind of agree with you about Burton and the Patriots, Tim. If the Bears didn't take him at 39, at 41, somebody was going to take him at some point after 39. But I think you said the Patriots, but they didn't have the pick at 40. I can't remember who did.
The Patriots took Henderson at 38.
38, right. But like I said,
that's what I was saying is if they hadn't taken Henderson there where he would have been available to us at 39, there's a good chance they could have taken Burden in that spot instead.
Oh, at 38, I see.
At 38, yes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That happened. That's an easy decision for the Bears,
for sure. But I'm saying at 41, then they may have still traded down then at that point.
Okay.
Or 41, excuse me. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, the Patriots did take Kyle Williams in the third round, who was another guy the Bears brought in for a 30 they were interested in, to another slot guy. So,
speaking of, let's mention that really quick because what have we been saying for 2 years now? We mentioned it last year's draft. We mentioned it this year's draft. They are in the past, they've been very intentional. They have taken the top 30 visits. Guys that they bring in for top 30s are guys they draft. They didn't do that this year. They did meet with these guys, but we don't necessarily know they were all reported. They did not bring in Loveland for a top 30, and they did not bring in at least one other player that from it in a top 30. I can't remember who it was.
I will say this real quick before we move along. I will say this. I mentioned on the show on Saturday when I was on with Swifty and some of the other guys that none of the guys, I said the same thing you did. None of these guys were top 30 visits. But then in the press conference afterwards, Poles mentioned Hyppolite was a top 30. I believe Newman was a top 30. And I think one more guy on day 3. If you guys remember who it is, please let me know. But I think there was one more guy on day 3 that they brought in for a top 30. So there were still guys that they were intentional about bringing in, that they brought in for top 30 visits. They just weren't guys at the top of the draft like they have done in the past. And in my opinion, I think it's because they already knew they had enough from Loveland. They were comfortable taking him. And in Burton's case, I don't think they really planned to take that guy. He just kind of happened to be there for him. So they took him. And obviously they like him a lot from his tape and all that. So, and there are questions about Burton, and I think Antoine Randall will help answer some of those questions. Cliff, I saw you had a question about that. I'll answer it at the end of the show, but to dig into it a little bit more. But yeah, I think there are some questions he has to be answered as far as Burton is concerned. And I think Antoine Randall will help push him in that direction. What are you going to say?
There's something I want to ask you about, Jeff, and I don't remember if we've talked about this or not. So getting really quick into this. So it was ironic because if you guys have noticed anything about Ryan Poles, the guys that he talks about in the pre-draft process never takes those guys, ever. It's all smokescreen. So during this process, I'm thinking to myself, well, they didn't talk about Rome. They did talk about Rome a little bit last year, but it really wasn't. That was more of Caleb talking about Rome than the Bears. They drafted Rome. 2 years ago, they didn't even talk about Darnell Wright. And I knew that was going to be the guy. I said it for months they were going to draft Darnell Wright, and then they did. So this year, going into the draft, I was sitting here thinking to myself, you guys already know who was the guy that I wanted more than anybody for the Bears. It was Omarion Hampton. And I told myself, they have not talked much about this guy. This is going to be the guy. Watch them draft this guy now because they haven't talked about him, which tells me that he is a good. I know he came in for a top 30. This could be a possibility. And then they're talking about Walter Payton. They're showing the running back thing. And leading into that, Roger Gill even says something that running back, yada, yada, yada. And with the Chicago Bears drafting here, and everybody tell me you guys did not think that they were going to take a running back there by the way that all played out. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff? They led you to believe that they were taking a running back with that spot. And I'm like, it's going to be Hampton. It's going to be Hampton. They're like Loveland. I was like, well, it's not Hampton, but I'm happy. I really thought they were going to take a running back after they did all that.
I didn't think it was going to be Hampton. I will say that I didn't expect Hampton, but I didn't expect Loveland either. I wasn't thinking.
No, I don't think anybody really expected Loveland there.
There was a couple guys I thought they could go with there that were sitting around on the board. A couple of them I can think of off the top of my head. You guys have heard me mention many times. I really liked Mykel Williams. I thought he made a ton of sense there. He's sitting there. He went right after that to New Orleans at 11. So he was one guy I thought made a lot of sense there. Who else? Kenneth Grant made a lot of sense to me. I think they could have taken him there. He went 13th to Miami. There was a few guys in there. Derek Harmon, he went 24th to Pittsburgh. He's a great story, by the way. I think he would have been a good fit defensive tackle. But again, no, those are all defensive players, and they clearly wanted a weapon here. Ben Johnson had a cluster of guys in the first round that they mentioned in the presser that he liked a lot, that he would have taken, he would have been fine with. So, or he was advocating for, I guess was what they were saying, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So that's just kind of what I think about that. But in regards to, I kind of want to speed through some of these other guys so we can get to these other questions and stuff. But in regards to Trapillo, there's a lot of talk about this guy too, about whether he was going to play the left side or the right side. I like this kid, first of all. I think he's got a good off the field demeanor. And here's a clip Aldo's got of him too, by the way. And this is good stuff in Pass Pro. There was something I noticed because I've watched a lot more of this guy since they drafted him. And one thing that I noticed about him that's very, very, very clear right off the bat, and a lot of people have been talking about his anchor, which is, I think that's absolutely true. He's got a very, very good anchor. But his play strength, when you see him on the field, to me is like it's very, very, very noticeable, especially when you consider a guy like Braxton Jones and how he can get pushed around a little bit sometimes. You see this guy on the field in Pass Pro. he is like, really the best way I can describe it, he's like a fucking brick wall. Pardon my language, but it's like you can't move this dude. As soon as he makes contact with the guy, not only does he not move, but look at this. He gets one hand on a guy and he redirects him. He's got good feet. I like the way he's able to change direction and shadow with the rushers that he's going up against. I think he's got better athleticism than people are giving him credit for. Look, he's on the move right here, doing a good job in space. I just think he's an underrated pick. And I think what was interesting is, like I said at the top, there's a lot of people talking about how whether he's going to play the left side or the right side or what he might practice at. And we've even discussed that some between myself and some other people that I talk about with the Bears in group chats and stuff. But in the press conference the other day, Ryan Poles mentioned they're going to let Trapillo practice at left tackle. And I'm assuming Braxton Jones isn't going to be ready right off the bat for camp. So, or for OTAs, I should say. So they'll probably begin right away with Amagaji and Trapillo battling out at tackle there, and we'll see how they look. So that was interesting to me. So to me, that's that. And because I thought maybe they would actually consider letting Darnell have some reps at left tackle, but from the sounds of it, to me, it doesn't look like that's what they're going to do. And the only reason I thought that might happen in the first place is because of comments that Poles had made before the draft about the possibility of that. So
I still think they're going to. I still think
he's going to get some reps. I think as soon as the first time somebody in the media and OTAs sees Darnell Wright on the left side, that's going to be the first thing they say. Darnell Wright, practicing left side, left tackle. That's going to be the only thing they say. They're not going to mention anything else going on in the play but Darnell Wright being on the left side. So we'll see. I think it's possible that could still happen, but I thought it was very telling that he just said right off the bat, yeah, we're going to let Trapillo start off on the left side and see how he does. So, and I agree with you, Swifty. I said this before as well. I don't think that even if he does get reps on the left side, Darnell, that is, I think he's still going to start on the right side. He probably stays there at least this year. He's
a proven right tackle in the NFL. Why move a guy who he still has upside at the position? Even
the only reason you would do it is to get your best five on the field. And the only reason that would happen is if you say, okay, Trapillo or whoever else can't play the left side as well, so we got to stick him on the right side. So maybe we move Darnell to the left.
But in my opinion, if he doesn't improve on the left side, if he's not a better player on the left side, then leave him at the right. Why wouldn't you let him play his best position? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, they obviously saw enough out of this kid, and Ben Johnson's included in this, and Trapillo, that is, where they thought he could play left tackle. So, he did play left tackle early on at Boston College for a couple years, but then he moved over to the right side, and he was much, much better there. He was still pretty decent on the left side. He wasn't bad. He was just a lot better on the right side. So the Bears, like I said, obviously saw enough of him on the left side to think it was okay, that he's fine, and they want to try him out there and see if he can do it. And I think it was Flex made a point that if he can make it on the left side and he's your long-term option there, it's a big win for us. Here it is right here, that your comment, Flex. It's a big win for the team, and I agree with you. And I like this kid. I mentioned before, I liked him. I like the way he talks off the field. I think he's a really impressive individual. He went to Boston College, so he's smarter than shit. He obviously has a connection there with Ryan Poles. Obviously, both of them went to Boston College. But his on-the-field demeanor is what's the most impressive.
Yeah, played with Ryan Poles' dad as well.
Yeah, he played on the same team as Ryan Poles' dad. Yeah, he said that to him on the
which
phone
was
call.
the team his dad, Ozzy's dad, blocked for Doug Flutie on the miracle Hail Mary.
I didn't know that, but that's interesting too. Mm-hmm. So in any case, there's connection there. And this kid, like I was saying, I like his demeanor on the field. He plays with a nasty mean streak, and I think the Bears need that. They need some more of that. This kid is, like I said, he is tough. He is strong. He is a stout, like brick wall, like son of a bitch on the field, man. And I really like it. I like the way he plays, and it's a different kind of. And I mentioned this on that show too that I was on Saturday. I want to tell you guys it too because it's an opinion that I have, and I think we're going to start to see this more with Ben Johnson at the Realm. In the past, with offensive linemen, Ryan Pace, and tackles in particular, they've seemed to stress the importance of athleticism and length, and obviously length and all those things are always important, but really the athleticism, the ability of these guys to move. And sometimes I feel like that was at the detriment of the play strength. With this particular regime with Ben Johnson, I think we're going to see a shift now with these offensive linemen, in particular tackles, with some of the importance on the traits with these guys being more so along the lines of play strength and play disposition. And when I say disposition, I mean like the way they play on the field. For lack of a better term, how much of an asshole they are on the field, how much they play like a mean son of a bitch on the field. Again, for lack of better phrasing, but that's what you're looking for from your offensive linemen, to play like that. At least I think this regime is anyway. So I think we're going to start to see a shift more towards guys that play like that and have that play strength than we have in the past. And Trapillo's a good example of that to me. So Swifty says I think he just got better and stronger after his freshman year. It's not really that he was better on the right side. I think that's a good point, Swifty. I mean, you're talking about a kid who was young, and, he's 6'8" and everything too. We got to consider that it's probably not real easy, and he's still learning how to do it. It's probably not easy for an 18, 19-year-old kid to learn how to leverage a 6'8" body. The kid didn't wrestle as far as I know. So it'd probably be hard for him to learn how to do that properly, to get his weight down, get his butt down, get his hips underneath him. It's hard for big guys to learn how to do that. And he's still in the process of doing so. And so I tend to agree with you, Swifty. I think with the more he learns with technique, I think the stronger he gets, the older he gets, and the more he matures, I think he could very well be a starting left tackle in this league. And it's a great thing for us if he becomes that. So let's hope he does. And I think, again, with the competition that there is there, I don't want to say that Karan can't be the guy. I don't even want to say Braxton can't be the guy, because I'm not going to shut the door totally on him yet. But I think it's getting to be his time now, because you're not going to sign him to a big money contract unless his improvement is so unbelievable that you can't move on from him. And I don't think that's going to be the case. We haven't seen enough from him in 3 years to warrant the fact that he would jump that much. So I think your starting tackle of the future is either Amagaji or Trapillo. We'll wait and see. But in any case, moving on. Another guy I liked a lot in the draft they took in the second round. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to the day 3 guys or not at this point. So
hang on a second.
I
want to show everybody something real quick. Okay,
so I want to talk about Turner.
Yep. Jeff and I have been having this laugh over the last few days. Ozzy Trapillo has got to be the doppelganger of our cousin Luke. I'm telling you, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's literally an identical replica. Tell me that is not Ozzy Trapillo. They are the same person.
And like Luke is big too. He's not 6'8". He's probably like 6'4", though. Luke's a big kid.
6'4", probably 230, 240. Yeah.
Yeah, every bit of 240. Might be 250. Luke's big.
He told me not long ago he was pushing 300. I was like,
I wouldn't doubt it. Luke could probably be an offensive tackle these days.
He would be.
I just think it's funny because they do look so much alike. It was funny when I saw that, and they kind of talk alike too. It's weird.
Yes,
man. They're like kind of alike. It was an interesting thing, but so we're gonna be making fun of him about that for a long time.
Oh, for sure.
But I kind of hope the kid ends up really, being that future left tackle for us, like I said. So moving on to Turner after that good little laugh we got there. And Cliff says if Luke wears the jersey, by the way, he'll be getting girls and free drinks. They might think it's him. They might not know any better. So he is married, though, so I don't think he'll be trying to get free the girls at this point. But Shamar Turner, I wanted to talk about him a little bit real quick. So this guy, another guy, I think this is a big pick for this defense because he's the first defensive player taken. I think Dennis Allen's got his fingerprints all over this. This kid, very impressive to me. I think he's got a little bit of everything you look for in a defensive lineman. He's an impressive kid off the field too. He seems like a nice guy. He's very excited to be with the Bears. He's excited to be in the NFL. You can just tell by the way he's talked that this is really what he wants to do, and he's just ready for the moment. He's got great versatility. Before this season, before he moved inside the defensive tackle, he'd been an edge player. When Nick Scorton transferred in from Purdue, they asked him to move inside. He put on like 30 pounds, and really he didn't lose any of his athleticism. What I love most about this kid, though, is like you're seeing all these highlights here that Aldo's showing. This kid is phenomenal against the run, or at least he can be absolutely phenomenal against the run. And for an interior defender, a guy who was an edge for the first couple years of his career at Texas A&M, to put on 30 pounds, not lose that ability, still have that kind of play strength to be able to play inside like that. I think he could be a 1 tech for this team. I think he could be a 3 tech for this team. I think he could play on the edge for this team. You can do whatever you want with him because he's strong enough to defend against the run on early downs, and he's good enough and fast enough and quick enough with good get off, good burst, good first step quickness, to where he's got his good pass rusher as well on sub packages. So I love this pick. I love this kid. I think he's going to be absolutely an integral piece of this defensive line. And although I love that quote that he made when he was talking about stealing people's lunch money, Greg talks about it all the time. As a defensive lineman, you got to be a little bit of a dirtbag. Okay, you got to be a little bit.
The word he uses is you got to be a thug.
He says that's what he says. You got to be. That's the kind of attitude you got to have. And look, this kid absolutely on the field, he brings that mindset, and I absolutely love it. It's great to see. I think he's going to be a really good player on this defense. Like I said, I think Dennis Allen has fingerprints all over it. You could see in the draft room when the position coach, Jeremy Garrett, was on the phone with him. You could tell he loved it. He was all on board about this kid. Bill Johnson in the background, who was he's a defensive line guru who they brought in as a coach. I don't think he's considered a defensive line coach, but he's just a defensive coach on the staff. But his expertise is on the defensive line, and he's all smiles in the background. You can tell he's all excited about the pick. So this is a guy that, and Allen was like that too in the background. You could tell he was excited about it too. He didn't even talk to the guy. So this is, to me, a phenomenal pick for a guy in the second round. They got such good value, I think, having those 3 second-round picks, and they're all going to be very good players. The first 4 picks in this draft, to me, were just tremendous value for the Bears. I think Loveland, I don't know if you could, in most drafts, if he's a top 10 pick. In this draft, he was, and I can absolutely see why he would be, and he's absolutely going to be a weapon. So I didn't mind that at all. And again, overall, the value of those first 4 guys was excellent. So maybe next week we can dig in a little bit more to the day 3 guys in the UDFAs, since we kind of ran out of time with it today talking about the first 2 rounds. But anything you want to get to, Tim, last minute before we dig into some of these questions, because there's some good ones here.
No, let's get into the questions, because I'm sure it'll bring up some of these other picks that we haven't really discussed much yet. So let's jump into it. I saw a couple of them. Let me see if I can find one.
So the first one is Cliffs, and I wanted to talk about this earlier because this is a really good thing, a really good question a lot of people have been talking about lately, is Burden and his off-the-field stuff, okay? He wants to know, will Burden be able to mentally handle the lack of targets? And the reason he says that is because we have heard some stuff, again, about what's his attitude like off the field, and I haven't necessarily heard bad things about that per se, but there is some talk about on the field once in a while, if he's not getting the ball, does he always play 100%? Does he always give it his best effort when he's not getting the football? And we've heard Ben Johnson talk about many times, no block, no rock. Not only just that, but how are you running your routes when you're not 1 or 2 in the progression? Are you giving it everything you got to allow your other guys to have that opportunity? Because that's going to matter. If you're doing those things, you're going to get the football. And I think Antoine Randall is going to absolutely, in that room, be all over Luther Burden all the time. Like, look, dude, if you want to reach your potential, this is how you do it. He's probably going to tell him, look, I didn't have the kind of skills that you have. I was a quarterback that turned into a receiver.
And he was absolutely fired up. You could tell if there was one guy that he was looking for, it was Burden, and he was jacked up about it.
He was. And I think he's absolutely going to coach the shit out of him. And I think Luther Burden is in a great spot because of Antoine Randall. In my personal opinion, we talk about this stuff all the time as NFL fans. A great player in the draft can get drafted by a shitty team or into a shitty situation and never meet their potential because of the fact that they were in a bad spot, okay? Mm-hmm. Luther Burden, I'm not going to say he would never reach his potential in some bad situations, but maybe he's a guy that if he's in the wrong spot, he doesn't quite get to where he could be. I think with Antoine Randall, he absolutely has the best chance he has to reach his ceiling. And Strohls, I 100% agree with you about DJ. He was having some issues last year with his attitude. It was starting to piss me off. I think with Antoine Randall, he's absolutely going to get his ass in gear this year. So I think that's going to be a big thing for our entire receiver room. Rome doesn't need that. He's a go-getter. He's the kind of guy you don't have to worry about his attitude anytime. I know he's going to go out there and do what he's got to do. And I think he's going to get coached still and get coached hard and get coached well and improve. But I think those guys in particular need a little bit more of a boot up the ass than obviously Rome would. So I do want to see that, and I'm going to be interested to see that. So what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Well, I'll say with DJ, I don't think DJ's effort was ever in question. I think the guy always played hard. I just think that he had attitude towards the coaching staff and how things were being handled, and he was a little too public with it. And it was the same thing with Jalen Johnson. I think some of that, although we all would agree that things were completely out of hand, you keep your mouth shut and keep that stuff in-house, and they did not do that. And so it's a bad look on them because of that. And I think that's where a lot of this is coming from with people watching and how they've talked about DJ since the season ended. But I do think that and yes, Scrolls, you're right. We did see DJ leave on that play. He did claim that he was hurt. I'm sure he was a little hurt there, and it was a really bad look. I will give you that. But I never saw like a serious lack of effort. Like when he wasn't the main target, you could see that he was still out there blocking and playing hard. But I think that's his play style. I think DJ just plays hard all the time. That's just how he is. I mean, he's the kind of player that he's not getting tackled on the first tackle. You got to like gang tackle that guy to bring him down. So, but again, yeah, although I agree, there was a little bit of that prima donna in there that we've not seen him before. And I do think that I agree with you here that that's going to go back to normal. And I agree. He's going to shake that off. I just think it was such a mess last year that nobody really knew how to handle the situation. And they were all just tired of it. And I'm not defending it. I'm not defending any of their actions because, again, like I said, you got to keep that stuff in house. You don't go out to the media and talk. The media is feeding off of that. That's what they want. Yeah. They just want to take that and run with it. They're going to spread that rumor and the lies way more than what it should be. And that's just what they do. They got to turn a coal into a wildfire. That's their job. They got to get clicks. So, but again, I think a lot of that's going to be water under the bridge. It's going to go away. We're going to see the old DJ again. But yeah, I agree with everything you were saying about Burden. I think he's going to be a good fit here. You can tell that Randall L wants him to play for him, and he's going to coach him up hard. And I agree with you that there was some of that stuff on tape in college, but again, like you said, Ben Johnson ain't going to put up with that. Either you block or you don't get the ball, period. And he's, like you said, he's mentioned that many, many times now, or he's not necessarily said the exact same way, but he's made it known like everybody's going to block. Everybody's going to run hard when it's not their turn in the progression. It's just what you're going to do, or you're not going to get the ball. And he's going to make it. He's going to do more to get these guys targets when they are doing all the things the right way. So moving on. Let's see. What else we got? Go ahead.
One more thing before I move on to the next question. So just about one more thing about DJ just because I want to kind of mention this. So I agree. Yes. I mean, DJ's a really good player. You don't want to lose the guy. You don't want to lose his attitude. And there was obviously a lot of losing going on last year. So that was part of the problem. Obviously he kind of lost interest over that, I'm sure. So he's a good player. He's not a guy that you want to just get rid of. You want him at his best. And he's so good after the catch that you don't want to lose that part of your offense. But that being said, again, that attitude can't be there. He's a team leader. He's a freaking captain last year. You can't be doing that stuff as a captain. You got to be a leader for your teammates. So when you see things like that happening, that cannot be something that continues. Now, just to surmise this in one small sentence, I think, or two, it's really two sentences here, but I think Swifty made a great point. This is the whole thing with DJ here. Let's see if I can find where that comment went now. I lost it. Here it is. Thank you, Aldo. It was just one play, talking about that play earlier when he was running off the field. DJ's tough and played through injuries, which he has definitely done. You definitely can see the prima donna attitude at times, though. In a nutshell, that's exactly what it is. And Greg's mentioned multiple times, receivers are prima donnas for the most part. They almost never aren't in most situations. I think Roma's about the only one who's not a prima donna that I've seen in a long time. So it just doesn't happen very often. These guys always have a little bit of that to them. So again, you want him at his best. You don't want to see that kind of attitude out of him. And again, I think I said this earlier. He's going to get a little bit of that boot up the ass from Randall L, and I think it's going to be good for him. So moving on to the next question from Aldo. This was a really good one. So Tim, you go ahead and answer this first. Who should the Bears go after a veteran free agent running back?
My simple answer, no. If I will tell you this, all these. I saw a headline on a podcast today. I can't remember which one it was, but it was the Bears are. It was basically saying the Bears are all in on Nick Chubb. Guys, no, they're not. Like they're not. I don't see it happening. Look, Nick Chubb has a serious history of injury. He's had ACL injuries and surgeries on the same knee. I don't know if he's ever coming back fully from that. I just don't. And he's on the wrong side of 30. He hasn't played much in 2 years. He didn't play at all last year. He played maybe a week or two that he came back and played. I don't see it happening. The one name that I'm interested in on this, actually, there's two names I'm interested in. So, number one, Gus Edwards. Let's go through these guys real quick. Gus Edwards played last year in LA with J.K. Dobbins, and they had a pretty good two-headed monster there. But when J.K. Dobbins got hurt, Gus Edwards was not all that great. He's never been all that great. He's kind of a nice little depth piece, complimentary guy. Not a lot of. Now, would that be a good guy to bring in possibly for some depth and a veteran? Sure. If the money's right, maybe I would consider it. Chubb, I would not even look at, even though Chubb is the most dynamic of anybody on this list. The health, I just don't see him being healthy enough for that. I do like Dobbins. He had a really good year in LA last year, but again, that's what Jim Harbaugh does. They love to run the ball. The offensive line was excellent. I just think he's going to command a little bit more money. The Bears aren't spending that kind of money. The two interesting ones here are Williams and Wilson. Now, Jeff Wilson, if you guys don't remember, he was in San Francisco, and he was doing really well with that offense. And then that's right before they traded for McCaffrey. And once that happened, they shipped off Wilson to Miami. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I believe that's how that went. And he's just never really panned out over in Miami, but they've also got a surplus of backs there. Because the very next season or the very next draft, they took A-Chain, and he's been lights out. So, again, another guy that can't stay healthy, though. But the interesting one here to me is Jamal Williams because of the Ben Johnson connection. But if I'm not mistaken, he wasn't healthy last year either. And he really hasn't done anything since he left Detroit 2 years ago whenever Monty showed up. So, I think he's on the wrong side of the end of his career. I just don't see anybody on this list that really screams sign me. I just don't. I don't like the idea of spending more money on a veteran running back because you're going to have to spend, probably $2 million or more a year on the guy. You're going to get more production, in my opinion, out of a UDFA that you would one of these guys. So to me, I don't like the idea of signing one, but that's just me. Would I look into a guy and consider it? Possibly, but I just wouldn't do it, in my opinion.
So I'll try to keep this brief and simple. So just this list right here that we have in front of us that we know of, that we know of guys that are veteran free agent running backs right now: Gus Edwards, Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, Jamal Williams, Jeff Wilson. These guys all have injury issues. Every single one of them have had injury issues at some point. And most of them have had extensive injury issues. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins can almost never stay on the field. So Nick Chubb now has had major injury issues now over the last couple of years. He's had issues with both his knees. I think one of his knee injuries, he tore just about everything in that knee, but he's torn both his ACLs. This guy's just had issue after issue with injuries, and they're major ones. Now, there have been some workout videos of him squatting 600 pounds and stuff, which is great and good for him, but I don't know if he's going to still have that explosive ability on the football field. If the Bears were to sign a guy like Nick Chubb, it would all come down to money. In my opinion, it would have to be a contract they could get out from under if he didn't end up making the team. So, or being good enough to stay on the team, I should say, throughout the course of it. Because we got to consider too, in my opinion, with the running back room that the Bears have right now, it's not great, but they could get by with it. And the reason I say that is because, again, we got to consider who the head coach is and how innovative he can be with this offense. And the fact now we actually have an offensive line who can get the job done on paper. So, again, these are good players who we haven't seen play together yet. But, on paper, they should be able to get the job done, much more so than we've seen in the past. So, I don't think they necessarily need to bring somebody in. They might. But I like the room that they have. I think right now, if the season started today, DeAndre Swift would be the guy on the field for first down. But I think you're going to see all these guys have contributions, including the rookie Monanga. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities. I think the inevitable Roschon concussion is going to force him to be in the game as a pass blocker in blitz pickup on third down because DeAndre Swift's just not as good at it. So I absolutely think he's going to carve himself out a role. I think another guy that we're not really talking about a lot is the guy who tore his ACL early last year before the season started in preseason. Ian Wheeler, fast as shit, got tons of speed. I think if he's healthy, Ben Johnson will find a way to use him. I think he makes the team. So, Muck, I see what you're saying about Roschon. I don't know if he's necessarily the answer either. He's never been super impressive to me. He's a guy who will get the couple yards you have to have in short yardage situations. So I do appreciate him for that. He is pretty good as a pass blocker and in blitz pickup. So I do appreciate him for that. But the main thing with Roschon is the guy just cannot stay healthy. He's got concussion issues every year. So that's why they just, they obviously had a need there, and they went and got a guy eventually in the 7th round. But it's a guy with great value. And before I move on to the next thing, just real quick, and I'll talk about him a little bit more next week. But it was just such great value getting Monanga in the 7th round. And in most years, he's not going to be there in round 7. He probably goes in round 4 or 5 or something. But this class was so deep with so much running back depth that it almost worked out for the Bears that they didn't take a guy earlier in the draft because they got a really good guy at the end of it. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, you still would have wanted to have one of those guys at the beginning of the draft too. Would have been great, but I like Monanga, and I think this room is better than people are giving it credit for. So moving on, next question. I think it's the last question we got here. Maybe a couple more. Cliff wants to know, who do you think the cut candidates to save money are? Any surprises?
Ryan Bates, I think, is one that we could potentially see.
I think Bates is really on the hot seat because of the fact that, number one, he's another guy who cannot stay healthy. They brought in so much more depth on the offense.
They're going to save a good chunk of money for him, too. I think he's got $5 million on the cap.
I think a big part of the reason he's been on the roster is because he can play center. I think bringing in Newman, and if he can come along and show you he's got the ability to play center, I think that really makes things difficult for Bates. But, again, he's a young player, a 6th-round pick. I don't know. I think it'd be tough to just get rid of him. But in any case, I think he's a guy you got to consider maybe there. It could be potentially cut. Really, there's just a lot of good depth on this roster. It'd be hard to
I do think one of those veteran receivers could be on the hot seat that they just signed. One of them is probably getting cut. Well, Tyler Scott, but I also think one of either Bateman or Zacchaeus could possibly be a cut. I do think it's likely, excuse me, I'm hurting here. I do think it's more likely that Bateman stays on because, or not Bateman, my goodness. I'm thinking of Rashad Bateman. Devin Duvernay, I'm thinking of the wrong Baltimore receiver. I do think it's more likely Duvernay gets kept because he has return ability in the punt and kick return game.
He is your returner right now, so
yes.
he's not going anywhere.
But I do think Zacchaeus could be the lone man out there.
Scott could be.
Definitely Tyler Scott, yes. I think he's probably gone.
So that's a good question. I will have to wait and see the way they line things up throughout OTAs and stuff, Cliff, but I'll have my eye on that for sure. They've brought in so much more depth and so much more competition. And again, one of the things Ben Johnson said, if we've done anything, it's maybe made life a little bit harder on some of these guys right now that maybe it wasn't so much before. And even Pohl said too, some of these guys are going to have to grind harder than they ever have. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. But there's the last question from here, but here's another one from J2K that I want to get to before we get out of here. He wants to know how we grade the offseason between the coaches, free agents, and the draft. So first of all, I'll just say the coaches, just from, and again, I don't really like to do this before we've kind of seen anything, but at the same, especially
I will.
Draft, you don't know for another few years, but with the coaches, I mean, just from what we've seen so far, I got to give it like an A+.
Yes.
First of all, you hired the guy who's the best offensive innovator in the league right now, who's the best offensive play caller in the league right now. You've seen him doing it at a high level. It's not like Matt Nagy, who you hired hoping to be that guy who was doing it underneath Andy Reid. This guy has been calling plays at an elite level now for multiple years. and he's one of the most creative guys in the entire league. Not only is it impressive that they brought this guy in, I would have given him an A+ just for hiring Johnson, but they didn't stop there. All he did was bring in great assistant coaches that are going to do nothing but make this team better. Not only was it guys, it's mostly guys he's not comfortable with, but it's other people who have had success across the league throughout their careers. Dan Rochar had a ton of success throughout the course of his career. Dennis Allen's been one of the best defensive.
By the way, Rochar has a Pro Bowler on every single position on the offensive line.
Yeah. And again, Dennis Allen, like I said before, this guy has had successful defenses. He's been one of the
top
best
3 defensive coach in the NFL. He's a top 3 defensive coach in the NFL.
Probably. You know, they brought in a lot of great minds here. Randall L., one of the best receivers coaches in the league. You know,
yes.
They brought in those defensive line coaches who've been around the block. And again, what I liked most about their process with the coaching staff was they took their time hiring some of these guys, like Dan Rochar. They took their time hiring him. They made sure they got that one right, that they got a guy that was going to fit and made sense and their philosophies lined up.
He was the last one, too, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was the last one they brought in.
But they took their time with the defensive line coach, too, because, again, the same thing. They got to make sure they get that right. They hired Jeremy Garrett out of the college ranks, but they also brought in Bill Johnson, who's a guy who's been doing it for a long, long time and understands defensive line play. So I think those are important things to consider. For the coaching staff, yes, I have to give it an A+, J2K, because they've done such a good job bringing in guys who, on paper, should be able to get this thing going in the right direction.
Well, and I'm going to piggyback you real quick. My other part of it is he did an excellent job of molding experience with bright young coaching minds all together. And I think that balance is going to be extremely productive. Now, the one name we're not so sure of, obviously, is Declan Doyle. But if you hear everything that Sean Payton is saying about this guy, then you know that he is an incredibly bright guy and that he's probably your next Ben Johnson. That's the kind of football mind he's got. So, you know, and I loved that about Ben Johnson, that he went outside of his comfort zone, got guys that he doesn't know, but listened to people that he trusts and, you know, wanted to get different types of coaching, different types of experience, different systems, and try to take all of those good things from all those different places and try to mesh it into one. I think it's going to be so great to see how that works. And so look at all the different offensive minds they've got here and all the different offenses these places have run. You've got Ben Johnson, who's a little bit of everything. You've got some West Coast offense in here with Eric Bieniemy. You've got some of the Shanahan offense in here. You've got Sean Payton's offense, which is also kind of like a little bit of everything. Like, there are so many different avenues here of people that they've brought in. It's going to be incredibly special, in my opinion. I really hope that this is the most hope I've had in a long time with this Bears team, because you can just feel that something is different here. With Flus, you felt like, nobody liked that hire. Everybody thought that wasn't a Ryan Poles hire, and it probably wasn't. Everybody felt like that was the worst guy of the list of guys that they brought in. I just think there is something about this that feels different. This regime feels different. It's not the same old, same old. This is not your grandfather's Bears team. It's not. This is totally different. So, look, I'm not getting like the cart ahead of the horse here. I'm not going to get super excited, but I agree with you. It's an A+ with the coaching. I thought the free agency was an A+. I mean, you addressed almost every need that you had in free agency, which is the way to do it. You at least attempt to fix it in free agency so that you don't feel like you have to fill a need in the draft. That's the last thing you want to do, which is then you can go, again, back to what I always say, draft best available player. So I think the draft would be the one thing I wouldn't give an A+. I think that's more of a B+ range, maybe even a B-. But I think B- is a little low. I did like the draft. I have no qualms with it. So I don't know, Jeff. What about the rest of yours? What do you think about the rest of it?
I would just say, as far as free agency, I'm kind of with you. I wouldn't say A+. I'd probably give free agency an A, mostly because they brought in Joe Thuney in a trade. I mean, that was the big one right there.
They brought in a future Hall of Famer. How do you not give that an A+? You know?
Well, because wait a minute, I'll explain why. So the reason I say A instead of A+, because yes, you brought in Joe Thuney, who's a great player, He's getting a little older, but he's still, I mean, right now he's in the prime of his career. He's still a fantastic player. So you brought him in. He's going to help fortify your line. He's going to help out the other guys around him. You brought in Drew Dahlman, who is the best center on the free agent market. So you did your job there, getting a guy who's going to, again, you needed a center. You've had center problems for a while now, and this guy's a really good one. So go spend the money and get him. The one reason I would say I wouldn't quite give it an A+ is because the Jonah Jackson move, I don't know that I mean, it's because I'm not 100% sure he's going to perform up to the level he did in Detroit. I believe in Ben Johnson, and I believe Ben Johnson thinks he can get it done, which is why they did it. But I kind of need to see it before I'm like, okay, yeah, A+. This guy was a great move. I think he could be a great move because of the familiarity there and how well he did play in Detroit. But let's see it first. Let's see it before we again, like you said, get the cart ahead of the horse. So I'll give it an A for free agency for that reason. But finishing up the draft, I kind of agree with you. I'd say more like B+. And the reason I say that is because I liked a lot of the guys they picked. They got starters. They did a really good job with their first 4 picks in particular. I'd say B+ because they did. They maybe reached a little bit with a guy or two. They did kind of. You said they moved down a little too far, but I mean that's the offer they got when they got an offer to move down in the first place. You can't be picky and choosy about it. You get an offer.
Yeah, but you also don't have to do it. You can also take a player.
But if the value is there to do it because of what you're receiving in that deal, then it might make sense to do so. And again, they still got.
You also have to hit on the player too that you draft if you trade down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you trust your board and you take the guys that you like, I mean, then it works out that way. So. Maybe Poles was he stuck to his board a little bit more than maybe you could argue he should have. Maybe he should have kind of done a little bit of maneuvering there that he didn't do. And that's the one reason I would say he missed out on a couple of guys that I wouldn't give him an A+ for it. But I think he did a really good job in the first 2 rounds, getting really good players. He added good depth later on in the draft. And I think there's a lot of upside with these guys. So, and again, Monangai, I think that was a great pick for the one guy who didn't have a high RAS score. And that again goes against what Poles has historically done. He likes to draft guys with superior athleticism. Monangai doesn't have that, but he's a good player and he's a 7th round pick. So I like the draft. I gave it a B+ for that reason. I think it's a really good draft. There's a couple guys that I would like to see them get that they missed out on. I think there was a few areas they missed on some people, but I liked it a lot, and I'll give it a B+ for that reason. So we're out of time here. We went a little bit over, so we appreciate you guys being here as always. You had great questions tonight. Next week, we'll kind of have to continue this a little bit. I know we didn't get to everything we wanted to. There's some points that I wanted to make that I didn't get to address at all. So I'll talk about it a little bit more next week. Be sure to join us then. Real quick, guys, before we get out of here, just a quick reminder. As always, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us here at our Barroom Network on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Lots of great content here, not just us, but between Gabriel Talks Football and some of the other shows like Bare Their Souls. There's a lot of good stuff here. So join us, guys. We're here every Friday, as you know. And again, you can follow us all on extra Twitter. I'm at _Jeff Willis. My partner here, Tim, is at Tim Willis24. And our excellent executive producer is at Barroom Network. That is Aldo Gandia. So thanks again, guys, for being here. We appreciate your support as always. And until next week, bear down.
Da Bears.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.